No DQ Galaxy. We are live with a recap of AEW All Out 2024. From start to finish, I would say one of the wildest AEW shows of all time. And that is really saying something because we have seen crazy moments on AEW pay-per-views over the years. And just when you think they cannot push the envelope even more, they managed to do so. So let's talk about it. Shout out to everybody watching this, whether it's live or on demand. Real quick, I will talk about the buy-in matches, your basic buy-in show. You had the Acclaimed beating the Iron Savages. You had Dustin Rhodes, Sammy Guevara, and Hologram defeating the Premier Athletes. You had the Bang Bang Gang defeating the Dark Order. You had a segment with Sky Blue, who is currently injured with a broken ankle. She came out there on crutches. She was confronted by Mariah May. Mariah was called a skank by Sky, and Mariah responded by knocking Sky to the ground. Keep in mind, she was on crutches. And then Queen Adamita came out there and helped out Sky. The show was in Chicago. Sky Blue making an appearance in her hometown. And then our final buy-in match was the Undisputed Kingdom. They picked up a victory over the Beast Mortos, Shane Taylor Productions, and Action Andretti and Top Flight in a three-way trios match. It was fine. Nothing too special. Now, let's get to the main show. We kicked off with MJF versus Daniel Garcia. Hey, if you're not in the main event, you might as well be the opening match. It was a very good match to start off the show. Daniel Garcia definitely had a more aggressive side than what we've seen in the past. He attacked MJF before the match officially started. MJF, using his dirty tactics, he bit the wound of Garcia. Remember, MJF broke that glass over Garcia on Dynamite. The wound was reopened. MJF was trying to give Garcia this avalanche tombstone, but Garcia was able to escape that. He drilled MJF with a diving DDT. He tried to give MJF a pile driver, but his neck was giving him issues. MJF capitalized on that with a Panama Sunrise. Garcia kicked out. It was back and forth between these two. MJF was slapping Garcia. Garcia got all fired up. Then MJF with a thumb to the eyes regained the upper hand. They traded near falls back and forth. They traded submission holds. Garcia hit a pile driver. MJF kicked out of it, though. And then Garcia went for a top rope avalanche pile driver, but MJF avoided it. MJF gave Garcia a low blow while the referee was distracted and then used a jackknife pin to get the 1-2-3. MJF beats Garcia, but AEW wanted to protect Garcia in defeat. So after the match was over, MJF went for a handshake. Garcia did accept it. MJF tried a cheap shot. Garcia, though, caught it, took MJF down with a low blow, and then hit the avalanche pile driver to MJF. Not sure how I feel about Garcia losing here. They tried to give him his heat back, but to me, he really needed this win more than MJF. It is what it is. I think it would have been a defining moment for Garcia's career. I don't really know how far he can go from here, but I figured that they would have tried and gave him a big win over MJF. MJF didn't need the win, but MJF did pick up the victory. It was not really a decisive win. I could see them continuing the feud, and they'll probably have a match at a future pay-per-view where somebody gets shot out of a cannon and kicks at it too. More on that later. Let's move on here. We had the Young Bucks versus Claudio and Wheeler Yuta. I'm not going to say too much about this match. It was a very good match. It was filler, though, with a predictable outcome. We all knew going in, Claudio, Wheeler, they're not going to win against the Young Bucks at this stage of the game. But it was a fun, entertaining match between these two teams. Eventually, the Young Bucks picked up the victory. It was below the best Young Bucks tag team matches, but it was certainly a good match. I'm not going to knock it or anything, but it didn't really stand out on this particular pay-per-view, nor was I expecting it to. Considering all the other things that happened, this was basically just filler by AEW standards. The Rock's Jockstrap sent in a $2 super chat. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Says, sorry, but when AEW is on, it's better than WWE. Well, AEW definitely has a style, and I have some thoughts on how this show played out, so stay tuned for that. One thing I will say, this show lived up to the name, All Out. I will leave it at that. Let's talk about Will Ospreay versus Pac, or Pac, whatever you want to call him, Adrian Neville. This was a fantastic match. Another excellent Will Ospreay match. He always delivers. And you knew going in this was going to be great. Pac always delivers. And they absolutely killed it. It was a brilliant match. They delivered big time. The crowd was giving them a standing ovation before the bell even rang. Like, they were red hot for this match. And lots of counters, counter after counter. They were exchanging slaps, strikes. Pac went after the neck of Ospreay and gave Ospreay an avalanche brainbuster, but Pac kicked out of that. Crowd was chanting AEW. Continued to go back and forth. Pac hit a DDT, a Liger bomb. Could not put Ospreay away, though. Ospreay then did some moves, the standing Spanish fly, Oz cutter. He was hurting, though. Could not make the cover right away. And then Pac delivered a German suplex to Ospreay on the apron and then gave him a poison rana on the apron. Got him back in the ring, put on the brutalizer submission. Ospreay somehow managed to get his foot on the rope. Pac went for the broken arrow. Ospreay got his feet up. And then Pac countered a hidden blade attempt, delivered a German suplex. Pac then countered Ospreay again, went for a pin. Ospreay kicked out. Crowd was once again chanting AEW. Pac then hit another poison rana, reapplied the brutalizer. Ospreay broke out. Ospreay hit a poison rana, then a hidden blade. Pac kicked out of that. Crowd was chanting fight forever. Ospreay hit another hidden blade. Pac kicked out again. And then he hit another Oz cutter, a Styles clash. And then finally, after a third hidden blade, Ospreay got the win. So it was an absolutely insane match. Shout out to Dylan, who sent in a $10 super chat. Thank you, Dylan. I appreciate it. He is on his wrestling journey, uploaded some content to his socials, working at a show at AAPW. So thank you for that update, Dylan. And let me know in the chat where people can find you. Should they search AAPW or should they just go straight to your YouTube channel? Either way, let me know. And thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it. Yeah, Ospreay versus Pac was absolutely fantastic. Excellent match. You know it's going to get the 6+ stars, and you know what? They deserve it. They absolutely killed it. It was a brilliant match. Now, here is what really surprised me, because as great as Pac and Ospreay was, I expected it to be great. I was very concerned because the next match was Kris Statlander versus Willow Nightingale in a Chicago street fight. And I was like, how are they going to follow that? They are going to be in trouble. And as it turns out, they put on the perfect match to follow it. It was nonstop action. It was a wild brawl. And I think it was as good as any men's street fight that I've ever seen. It was hard-hitting, fast-paced, intense. If I had any criticism of it, I would say maybe they were not selling enough. But, I mean, on this show, come on. Let's talk about the lack of selling and people kicking out and recovering from everything. I mean, they were just doing all sorts of crazy moves, one after another. You had pretty much no pauses in this match. You had Willow immediately hitting a pounce, doing the cannonball in the corner. Then they were on the outside of the ring. Willow ended up being power bombed through the announce table. And then Kris Statlander was pounced through the barricade. Willow Nightingale was placed on a table that was set up. Kris came off the top with a swanton. Willow moved out of the way, still kind of got hit by Kris, but Kris ended up crashing through the table. Then they fought on the stage, and Stokely Hathaway had this trash can filled with weapons. Willow used a light tube on Kris. Kris was busted open, and then Kris came back and speared Willow off the stage, through tables down below. And this is what I was talking about with the no selling, because they were down and then they were pretty much right back up, back in the ring, doing more moves. We had thumbtacks brought in. They did a really creative spot, which I give them credit for. So Kris Statlander went for an axe kick, but she missed, and she did the splits into the thumbtacks. Crazy stuff here. But I applaud the creativity on this one. I've never seen that before. In all of the years I've been watching wrestling, this was a first for me. And Willow then gave Kris a DVD onto the tacks. Kris kicked out. Of course she did. And then Kris gave Willow an avalanche Spanish fly. She took a chain and she chained herself to Willow. They traded shots. Kris gave Willow a tombstone and then finally choked her out with the chain. And the referee finally had no choice but to stop the match. So Kris Statlander did pick up the victory, as I figured she would. And yes, another match with bleeding and just people kicking out of everything. This was a great women's match, I will say that. And hats off to them for following Will Ospreay and putting on a great performance and keeping the crowd invested. Yeah, it was an awesome match. Could have been the main event of a pay-per-view, quite frankly, with all the stuff they did in this match. Definitely not a dull moment. Shout out to Jordan1728, who sent in a $2 super chat, says, as a former wrestling fan, AEW brought me back. Well, there you go. AEW, on this show, they definitely presented something that was very different from WWE, and I'll be talking more about that later, so stay tuned. I will say this was not everybody's cup of tea, this show, but I will talk about it more in details in just a couple of minutes. Next up, we had Mercedes Moné versus Hikaru Shida. Actually, no, I jumped too far ahead. We got Okada versus Mark Briscoe versus Orange Cassidy versus Konosuke Takeshita for the Continental title. This was a really good fatal four-way. Very entertaining. Not a match of the year candidate, in my opinion, but it was never boring, never a dull moment. They always kept moving the match along. They teased Okada and Takeshita going at it, but then Orange Cassidy came in, and for a while, you had Orange Cassidy and Mark Briscoe working together. All four guys were doing vertical suplexes to each other, and then we got more blood on the show. Mark Briscoe's eye was bleeding, or near his eye, he was bleeding. And after a while, he finally fought with Orange Cassidy. After all, it was every man for himself. And then we also got Takeshita and Okada going at it for a while. And then everybody was taking turns with the big moves, and then the pins would be broken up. But eventually, it was Okada pinning Orange Cassidy with the Rainmaker. I expected this outcome, considering Okada isn't going to be losing the title to any of these guys at this stage of the game. Plus, in these types of matches where the odds are against the champion typically wins. Now, Mercedes Moné versus Hikaru Shida. This was the weakest match of the show. And this is becoming an unfortunate trend for Mercedes, where her match is the low point of the show. Not that it was a bad match, but something just seemed off with them. The crowd was chanting at times, but they were definitely the quietest for this match of anything on the show. And it was back and forth. Mercedes doing some of her signature moves, Shida doing her signature moves. But there was a really awkward moment towards the end where Shida did 3 of these katana kicks. And at some point, Mercedes was saying something to her. Shida went for a cover after hitting 3 of these kicks. Mercedes kicked out at 1 and then rolled out of the ring, which was very weird. And then they fought over a kendo stick. Shida got the kendo stick, was going to use it, but she would have been DQ'd. So she dropped it. She went for a Meteora, but she missed. And then Mercedes got the win with the Moné maker, which did not look good, and the crowd was flat for the finish. Maybe she needs a new finisher, because every time she's hit it, it hasn't looked good, or she has to practice it more. Maybe she just needs a new move. Just didn't look good. And yeah, this was the low point of the show. Yeah, Mercedes, who has been known for being a great wrestler, hasn't really been able to have a career-defining match in AEW so far, and was overshadowed by pretty much every other match on this show. So that's unfortunate for Mercedes. Shout out to Oofman, who sent in a $5 super chat. Thank you, Oof. I appreciate it. Says, Mercedes seemed to communicate something to Shida. Maybe an audible? I mean, that's definitely a possibility. I definitely noticed that when Mercedes was saying something to her. And yeah, the kick out at 1. The whole thing was very awkward. So I'm not really sure what happened there. But I know there were some claims online that there was an incident, but I haven't heard anything about that. So it could have just been that they went in a different direction, or there was some sort of a miscommunication. But either way, far from Mercedes' best work, and Shida too, for that matter. All right, now we move on to Bryan Danielson versus Jack Perry for the World Championship. This was quite the match. We did get CM Punk chants right at the beginning when Perry was making his entrance. He came to the arena in his scapegoat truck, and the Young Bucks greeted him. There was a CM Punk chant, but they got drowned out by people booing, and then there was an F CM Punk chant. And I don't really think there were CM Punk chants after that. They got shut down, and that was pretty much the end of it. Bryan Danielson had the final countdown, so it looks like they're using it for the pay-per-views. Maybe they got a good deal. I think Tony Khan said something like that they got a good deal on the usage of the song, which I think is far superior to the music he regularly uses. Anyways, this was a long match, feeling out process. Bryan was playing up the yes chants, despite WWE apparently sending him a legal notice. Perry got in a lot of offense, was going after the neck, which we all know Bryan has the bad neck. Gave him a draping DDT on the floor. Bryan kept fighting back, though, did this avalanche back suplex. He put on the label lock, but Perry got to the rope. Then Bryan suplexed Perry off the apron. Crowd was chanting, "You deserve it," at Perry. They were really hating on Perry, so the match had good heat. Bryan was targeting the tricep of Perry, did the yes kicks, went for the running knee, but Perry countered it, put on the snare trap submission, did some trash talking. Then the referee inadvertently got knocked down when Perry pulled the referee in front of him. The Young Bucks ran down. They attacked Bryan, gave him the TK driver. Then Claudio and Wheeler Yuta ran down to make the save. Perry tried to pin Bryan once the referee recovered. However, Bryan was able to kick out of it. Then Perry went for Bryan's running knee, but Bryan countered with his running knee. Then they exchanged shots back and forth. Perry was slapping Bryan, and Bryan just basically hulked up, hit another running knee. Perry kicked out of it. Then Bryan kicked Perry's head in and finally picked up the win with another running knee. So Bryan is still your champion, but perhaps the biggest story was the post-match. I mean, I think we all knew Bryan was winning. He was like a minus 10,000 favorite to win. So after the match, Killswitch attacked Bryan. And you know what this means, because Christian Cage came out there with his Money in the Bank contract, or just his world title contract where he can cash it in at any time. So he's coming out there and he was going to cash it in, but Jon Moxley and the Blackpool Combat Club stopped Christian. So Christian left. BCC got in the ring. They raised Bryan's hand, and I saw the turn coming here. Like, they're all raising his hand, and it's very sus. Sure enough, Claudio gives Bryan an uppercut, which Bryan actually no-sells. He's all shocked that Claudio gave him an uppercut. And then Jon Moxley pulled a Terry Funk from 1989, and he put a plastic bag over Bryan's head, suffocating him, attempting to murder him. The crowd was actually chanting, "This is murder." Reminded me of when Gus Fring used the plastic bag on Better Call Saul. So yeah, my jaw legit dropped. Like, I don't know why. Like, I've seen so many crazy things over the years, but suffocating a guy with a plastic bag, I was like, wow, they're really going here. Marina Shafir was out there, by the way, and Wheeler Yuta was the only one who was apparently not in on this. He was like crying and trying to stop it, but Pac was holding him back. So I guess Pac is officially part of the group, and Wheeler Yuta is going to be out of the group, or maybe it's going to be a new group. I don't know. So yeah, we had medical people coming out there, and they had to administer oxygen to Bryan. He's on the verge of death here. And the announcers are like, oh my God, this is the worst thing we've ever seen. But the show must go on. Now it's time for a lights out, unsanctioned match. Oh, man. It's definitely done for shock value. And I'm going to tie this into the final segment here. And yes, Willow Yuta crying was pretty funny. It was very, very graphic. And people have a phobia of being suffocated with a plastic bag. You know, you see that kind of stuff in the mafia. Oh, man. Crazy stuff here. But we're not done. You think that was crazy? We got the main event. And, of course, they have to find a way to top everything that we had seen up to that point. So we had Swerve Strickland versus Hangman Adam Page, lights out, unsanctioned steel cage match. And before I get to that, there's a comment here about Moxie's faction being all former WWE people. It'll be interesting to see if that plays into the future or not, but we'll see. I mean, it would make sense if this is leading up to something. But anyways, we'll talk about that more, I'm sure, over the next couple of weeks. So, lights out match. How do you top all the violent, crazy matches we've seen in AEW over the years? Building Nexus sent in a $2 super chat, says the good guy is 0-2 in this feud. I'm not sure which match you're talking about. Maybe you're talking about the main event here, but thank you for the super chat, Building Nexus. I appreciate it. So Swerve attacked Page before the match could even get started. You had Prince Nana bringing a bunch of things into the ring. You knew we were going to have the weapons and everything. Nana was taunting Page, calling him a stupid idiot. And we had a callback to their match from last year. We had the staple gun. Page had the staple gun, but then Swerve took it. He stapled Page, and then he took a family photo and stapled it to Page's head. And then Swerve was taking the staples out of his chest. Crowd was chanting, "You sick F." So yeah, that was all a little callback. We've seen that before. Nothing too crazy at this point. We had chairs being used. We had a table brought in. Page had barbed wire. He was using the barbed wire as a weapon. And we had a cinder block. Swerve is known for the cinder block. And he gave Page a vertebreaker on the cinder block, which looked like the edge hit Page's back, and Page was bleeding from this, so it definitely connected. And then they set up a table. Swerve put Page through the table with a Swerve stomp. Page kicked out of it, and in my opinion, Tony Schiavone had the line of the night. He said, "Of course he did." And that's really the theme of the show. Of course they kicked out, because that's what they do. These people are basically impervious to pain, and they could take almost an endless amount of physical punishment. Everybody on the roster from the opening match to the main event. But anyways, Page recovered naturally, and he had a splinter spike that was apparently from the burned down house. And he tried to stab Swerve with the spike, but Swerve fought back and stabbed Page repeatedly with the spike. And then Page managed to, despite being stabbed nearly to death, Page gave Swerve a low blow and powerbombed Swerve onto the cinder block. And guess what? Swerve kicked out of it. I'm sorry, I'm losing it here. Swerve kicked out of being powerbombed on a cinder block. And then Swerve regains control, powerbombs Page. I can't stop. He powerbombs Page into the steel cage. Swerve then gives Page a house call kick, sending Page head first into the cage. Then Swerve hit another Swerve stomp or house call kick. I'm not even sure what, but whatever he did, it didn't work. Page kicked out of it. Then Swerve tried to climb up to the top of the cage. I can't stop here. Page caught him, power bombed him, then hit the dead eye. Of course, Swerve kicks out. Of course he did. That is the quote of the year. We need a t-shirt. AEW likes to make a t-shirt out of everything. I think we need, of course he did, Tony Schiavone t-shirts on AEWshop.com, because that should be the new catchphrase for AEW. Forget we're the best wrestle. The new catchphrase should be, of course they did, in response to somebody kicking out. Yeah, this match was ECW on steroids. That's what this match was. So anyways, Page was telling Swerve to beg for mercy and then hit him with a steel chair, and Swerve would not quit though. Page then took out Swerve's grill and pulled out from the box that they had, pulled out a needle, and he literally stuck Swerve in the mouth with a needle. And then he took a steel chair and blasted it over the head of Swerve, steel chair to the head, and the referee finally decided to call the match off. Hangman Adam Page, your winner by knockout. So Swerve loses the world title. He gets his house burned down, and then he gets a needle stuck in his mouth, and he loses this lights out steel cage match to Hangman Adam Page. But he did kick out of like 5 billion things before he finally lost. Page left in triumph, and he considered going back, but decided, okay, finally enough's enough. And the announcers, they were so appalled, yet at the end, they said, that was a phenomenal match. So you're so concerned about the violence, but then you're like, this is so phenomenal. Tony Khan, how can Tony Khan want to put on a match like this again? But then they're like, that match was phenomenal. So it didn't even make sense how the announcers were acting here. Like, if they were so disgusted, wouldn't they just not call the match or quit? But then they're like, this is phenomenal. So it's like, you're enjoying it. What's the deal? Pick a side. Are you appalled or are you enjoying it? Like, the announcers kept going back and forth between being disgusted and then being like, oh my God, this is so entertaining, so phenomenal. Okay. So the pay-per-view was great. Let me get that out of the way. It was very entertaining. It's worth the money. It was long, too long in my opinion, as I always say. I think it was overkill. And I may have said this about one of the shows earlier this year, maybe Revolution, maybe Double or Nothing, maybe multiple shows, but I think they're doing too much, if that's such a thing. Like I said, this was basically ECW on steroids. That's what this was. And I put this out on Twitter. Where do you go from here? What's the next crazy stunt you have to do? Like, is somebody literally going to get shot with a gun on a pay-per-view and then they kick out at 2? I mean, that's what's coming next? That's the only thing I haven't seen. I have never seen somebody literally be shot with a gun. I mean, obviously not really shot, but, shot with a blank. They do a stunt. Somebody shot with a gun and somebody kicks out at 2. It's got to happen one of these days, and they're actually going to have like a fake bullet wound or something. It has to happen at some point. It's only a matter of time. Like, you got stabbing, you got attempted murder with a bag over the head. What's next? I just feel like, yes, it's different from WWE. AEW is trying to be as violent as possible and do things to the excess. But the problem with ECW was that I got numb to it. Like when somebody goes through a table, it doesn't mean anything. Finishers don't mean anything. You know these guys are going to kick out of 500 things before the end. I just think they're doing too much. And the question is this really going to help AEW long term? Maybe the pay-per-views will stay strong and you got 150, 200,000 fans that love this and will buy every pay-per-view if it's guaranteed carnage every time. So maybe it will work, but I don't know how this is going to grow their audience, because I think for a lot of fans out there, it's going to be too much. Like they're going to see this and they're going to be like, I don't want to see all this stuff. Like it's too much. I enjoy violence in wrestling, but I also believe things should be done in moderation, and there is such a thing as too much. You know, it's almost like Saw, or even worse, like the Human Centipede, or what's that movie? Hostel. If you've ever seen the horror movie Hostel and the sequels to that, it's like those movies are considered torture porn. Like they're so violent and graphic, like it's just done for pure shock value. So yeah, if you're a fan of this, is wrestling torture porn is what this is. And you know what? I like Hostel. I like Saw and the Human Centipede. So, you know, I there's probably nothing that would turn me off or where I would be like, okay, I'm not going to watch this. I just wonder if this is good for AEW long term. And I question if it's going to be good for them building an audience beyond the fans that are already watching. So that is my concern. I still think it was a great show, though. I don't even know what letter grade to give it, though, honestly. I would probably go an A-. I mean, I do think it was an excellent show, but I mean, I do have a few issues with it, namely that it was too long, and I think it was too much being done, too many kickouts. You know, just moderation was not even applied in any sense on this show. It was just like every match has to be kicking out of everything. 5 million finishers, near falls. How can we shock everybody next? What's the next thing we can do? Building Nexus sent in a $2 super chat, says, how about Page versus Swerve in a barbed wire massacre? I don't even know where you go with these guys. Like, that has to be the end of the feud, right? But, I mean, Swerve just had everything taken away from him. So I don't even know where he goes from here. And what's next for Bryan after being suffocated? Was this all part of Shane McMahon's plan? I don't know. Just absolutely insane show. And I don't even know what else to say about it. Like it's almost left me speechless. I've been talking here for 40 minutes, but like part of me is still trying to wrap my brain around everything that I just saw on this show. And I don't think they're going out of business. I mean, they're reportedly getting a very good TV deal renewal. And if TBS is happy, AEW is making money, then they're going to be fine. It's a bold move to go this far out. And I think even at one point there was a pitch for there to be the plastic bag over the head. Like it was done with Terry Funk, you know, in 1989. And I think Tony Khan actually vetoed it a couple years ago. I think it was Eddie Kingston. It might have been, I might be wrong on this, but I think Eddie Kingston pitched the idea of using a bag over the head, and Tony Khan actually said no, but they did it here. What's next? It is like the Attitude Era in the way where like they did so many crazy things and fans loved it, but like you set the bar so high, like one of these days somebody's going to get badly hurt. I know, you know, they're doing all the stunts and they're done as safely as possible, but you know, at what cost? Like how long can they keep doing this stuff? And, you know, like I said, is it going to take somebody actually, they're actually going to do a gunshot angle on the show for shock value? I mean, what do they do? But anyways, guys, I give it an A-. I thought it was a great show, and it is a good idea for AEW to be different from WWE. We'll see if this works out for them. But thank you guys for tuning in tonight. I appreciate it. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts on the show, what you liked, what you didn't like. Do you think that this is the right direction for AEW? Should they keep pushing the envelope? Is this the way to go? Did they need to dial it back a bit? I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on everything. So leave a comment on the YouTube channel. Stay tuned to NoDQ.com. You can check out full results on the site. Say yes to NoDQ.com, and I will see you all next time.